Okay, welcome to the Tuesday, August 21st, 2018 Facilities Committee meeting. I want to start with introductions and administrative remarks from our administrators. Do you have some things to inform us of?
I just want to let you know what we're going to start looking at is we always have the parking issue for students at the high school. So Dan, Brett Thomas, and myself went over to the satellite light lot at Rest where nobody really parks. So we're looking at that, and we may be coming back, letting you guys know that we may be moving some students that still want to park and want to drive, but they don't have spots on the main campus. So I just want to let you know that we're kind of looking at that. Nothing is in stone yet, but it looks pretty good. We talked to John Hearn, and since we're doing our own line painting, it won't cost us the dollars that it typically would to paint lines, even though there's some there, but they're very dull. So I just want to kind of give you a heads up that we're kind of looking at that way to give students some more parking. We looked at that, but then there's a cost to get the drivers back and forth to make sure they're there on time, and so we looked at that. But
is that it? Public comment? Going once? Going twice? Sorry. No. What's the Jeopardy thing? Da, da, da. Yeah.
Hello, Judy Sherry, Governor's Circle, Newtown Square. I'm going to get the agenda. Hold on. Most of my comments are about the minutes from June 5th. So if you could turn to this page in your packet, you can maybe follow along with what I'm saying. And these comments have to do with the responses to the questions I mostly posed. First of all, number 2, the response to the question, has the stormwater hookup for the middle school been certified to show that it is working at 100% capacity? The response was, it has not been certified that it is working at 100%. There have been no issues with water in the building since the hookup. So tonight I'd like to ask, is that still the case regarding stormwater and the administration building and the school? And how much of the $1 million underground system is currently being used? If it's not 100%, is it 50%, 60%? A lot of money was spent on that system. If there are any issues with the last storm, why wasn't the school district represented publicly at the Board of Commissioners meeting last night? At that meeting, there were discussions about the availability of funding for repairs. Does the district have a dollar amount needed to fix any damages? And is the administration satisfied with the current state of the stormwater issues on its properties? Number 3 in the minutes. In response to the question of why a former employee should receive a discounted rental fee, it was stated that the district is currently in the process of reviewing the facility rental procedures and will bring a recommendation to the Facilities Committee in the future. That was in June. When will this recommendation be presented? Will it include changing the rental process to an electronic one? Number 4, the tri-party agreement. Why won't board members respond with a simple yes or no to this question? Will you try to renegotiate the tri-party agreement or not? Are you satisfied with the status quo? Number 6.
I'm so sorry, but
That's right.
They're from which month?
June 5th. Facilities? These? On page 1 of, I don't know what this
Page 1 of 3, attached to the agenda. Do you see?
That's all right. Well, I appreciate I appreciate, yeah, no, I appreciate your wanting to at least follow along, so thank you at least for stopping to make sure that you're kind of on the same page.
Yeah, this is very different from what I got in my packet, so.
This is fine. You're reading fine.
Okay, good. That's fine.
I'm on both, so it's very confusing.
Okay,
No.
thank you for the explanation.
No, that's good. No, I appreciate, again, that,
Following me, nothing phase. I get it.
Yes, okay.
because some people would just pretend they were following along, even though it wasn't making sense, so I do appreciate that you stopped.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Number 6, will the township or sports groups contribute to the cost for turf replacement at Radnor High School? The minutes indicate that the past agreement was going to be reviewed this summer, and that the district is open to options to sharing the cost for turf replacement. What's the result of the agreement review, and will the township be included since it uses the district's fields and paid 1/3 the cost of the first turf field? Its programs contribute to the deterioration of the turf. Does the township pay anything significant for renting the district's fields? Number 7, regarding plans that have been developed to mitigate the effect of the increase in traffic with the Penn development across from Radnor High School, the response was that the district has had various meetings with Penn and has expressed concerns regarding traffic and traffic lights, and that the final approval of these plans will be done by the township. My questions are specifically, what recommendations were proposed by Radnor Township School District to improve the traffic impact at these meetings? And how can the public obtain copies of the minutes of these meetings between the township, the district, and Penn Medicine? And number 13, suggestion that the district should evaluate and implement using 3-point seat belts on all buses. The response was, Radnor Township School District believes that compartmentalization is the safest mode for our students and that most organizations oppose mandatory seat belts. I'm bringing to the board's attention that 8 states have passed legislation requiring seat belts be installed in school buses, and there is a growing interest among the states in this issue. In 2017, at least 29 states introduced bills to address it. Advocates for seat belts include the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National PTA, and the National Transportation Safety Board. The National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation is quoted in the minutes as opposing mandatory seat belts. However, according to a May 2018 New York Times article, the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services, a trade association that represents government officials overseeing school bus services, has also recommended that states consider installing lap shoulder belts in school buses. Quote, in very rare, serious crashes, especially those involving rollovers and side impacts, lap shoulder belts offer an additional measure of safety, said Charlie Hood, the executive director of the association. So, isn't it about time that the district require 3-point seat belts in all of its buses? And my final comments are about Roberts Road. And a lot of these sort of have migrated from finance, but I really think that Roberts Roads is a facility issue as well, so some of these just overlap. My comments at the August 14th Finance Committee meeting were about the June 5th Finance meeting, when Bud Hirsch, a representative of CAC, said that Jack Coyle's appraisal report stated that the 2 Roberts Road properties were close to the end of a useful life and deteriorating with not the proper upkeep. This is exactly what was stated at the meeting. However, later at the August meeting, Ms. Stern asserted that, quote, that's actually my recollection. They were saying the roofs were at the end of their useful life. I don't know that we ever refer to houses being at the end of their useful life, but I do recall the roof conversation from the CAC presentation. Did the board members listen to Mr. Hirsch? If Ms. Stern was right, why didn't anyone challenge him during the June meeting? Because he said it referred to the houses. And why didn't anyone on the board of the administration challenge Ms. Stern's mischaracterization of his remarks? Thank you. Oh, and I was going to play it for you, but I have to figure out how to sign in first. If you want me to play it, because he's very clear. He's not referring to roofs.
Not much. Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road. I thought it was appropriate for the board and particularly the committee members to consider as you look at issues that overlap the township and the school district in many ways, that I think we often say that we have the same tax base, which is absolutely true. However, we do not have the same constraints put upon us in terms of raising taxes. So as you make decisions that are involving both the township and the school district, it's wise to remember that the school district has a limit on what they can pay and what they can get return on in terms of their investments and in terms of their sources of revenue, while the township has an unlimited ability to raise taxes. So I think it's important to be mindful of our need to work collaboratively with the township, but at the same time, make it clear that we do operate under different financial constraints. Thank you.
Chip Layfield, Wayne. Just on Roberta's comment, they may have an unlimited ability, but the voters have an ability to stop them from raising taxes as high as they want. Real quick, I just wanted to thank this committee in particular and the district for getting your video up online. That's awesome that it's on YouTube and people can see it wherever they are, anywhere in the world, all around the world, can see it on vacation, whatever. And it's great, compelling TV watching you guys. And my comment is that I'm concerned because I've seen throughout the township there's been a reduction, actually a doing away with live TV hookups, which are, they've been enshrined in Radnor Township contracts with the first cable contracts, now they're telecommunication contracts. We have had the ability to get live hookups at the school district on demand, but also built in place. So you should have a hookup here. But we used to get one at the little building out, the activity center out there, the high school, and we had them throughout the township at Studio 21, at the library, and now everybody I talk to, they don't realize they have a live capability. And live TV is dynamic, it's exciting. People watch it at home, and they come in, they can participate, and I think the people in the room are more on edge. It's better, it's more real, because you don't have the ability, not that you guys do, to change it or to doctor the tape. And it's something we've had since 1976. So I just really want the district to reach out to the township and make sure that you're an active partner and think about how can we use this technology to serve the people that are paying these cable bills, these high bills. When the middle school went in, the idea, as I recall, was that the theater was going to be at a place where you could hold meetings and people could maybe hold meetings or live broadcasts out of there of events and different things, and I don't believe that's happened. So there's a lot of capacity that's not being used, and people I've talked to on different committees, even the telecommunications committee, even Studio 21, aren't aware of that ability to broadcast live. And I'd hate to see that go away just because people don't know that we have it. And I believe we're in the process of negotiating a contract with Verizon. I think it's Verizon. So it's important that we keep the resource we have and really enhance it to serve the community. Get your message out, get the entertainment the kids do out, and you know, really, it'll be great as we move forward. Now that it's on YouTube, we can watch it wherever we are. So thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Moving on, the board agenda action items.
So you'll see some vehicles on there that, due to the salt that we've been using over the past years with it, we need to get those, and they'll be traded in next month, hopefully. The next thing will be, there's also a trailer on there, I'm sorry, that has rotted through the deck of it. So we'll be getting rid of that as well. Approval of contracts. I'll start, and Michelle, feel free if you'd like to jump in. We have a lot of concrete in the district, and we've been looking at this over the past year or two, and it's going to be a lot of money to replace it. So in talking to Michelle and the maintenance crew, we were talking about bringing Blackney Hayes in to help us through that concrete work and determine which should be replaced first, and to help us go out and get bids on that. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
As Todd said, we do have a lot of concrete work throughout the district that needs to be completed, and there's work at every building that needs to be completed. Some buildings have more extensive work that needs to be done. For example, Wayne has some outdoor steps that are deteriorating and need to be replaced. The middle school, if you look in the bus loop and walk towards the building, you'll see that the concrete is all chipping up in front of the cafeteria. So those are just some of the areas. We've also noticed that in our cutout walkways, the mats that are there with the ridges on them are deteriorating and need to be replaced. So Blackney Hayes has done a lot of work with the district. You may recall that they did the renovations at Ithan and Wayne. We've been very happy with their services, and they provided us with a quote to do all of the engineering and everything for the concrete site work, as well as preparing the bid documents and overseeing the projects at a cost of $14,000.
Do you want us to ask questions?
Yeah, you can ask questions.
Okay. So,
14 grand for all the engineering work and surveying work?
yeah, but wouldn't that be normally stuff that the operations director would have done? We've never outbid concrete work like that by itself, other than related to a project.
We have not bid out concrete work by itself in the duration of time that I have been here.
Right.
Because of the extent of the concrete work and how much concrete work needs to be done, and the fact that we had some bad winters and the concrete work was a result basically of some of those hard winters, we think it's in the best interest of the district to engage an architect or engineering firm in this project and go out to bid for it. It's going to be over the bid threshold for the concrete replacement work. And it's going to be a prevailing wage project. I think when Mr. Burnaby would bid these things out, he would break them down so they
Yes.
wouldn't necessarily
Exactly.
be prevailing wage. However, we just have too much that needs to be done at this time.
So
Well-
where do we have in our budget dollars for concrete repair? If it's going to be that kind of a number, where is that in our, is it in our budgeting plan?
We would look to use a combination of funds from the capital projects fund as well as some money from the general fund in order to complete the project.
Okay, but going forward, I get it, Leo's been gone for what, 18 months? Maybe it's more. For you guys, it must feel like 10 years, but
Been
and a half.
beginning on the start of the third year.
start of the third year. Because this is the kind of stuff we really should not have piled up. I mean, I got how we got here, but that's just not, we wouldn't want to be in that kind of situation for this or anything else of this magnitude. I don't know. I hope this is stuff that'll come under the purview of an operations director who has not just a day job of HR or of finance and trying to do this on the side.
And some of the concrete work that we need to do, our maintenance staff had addressed previously.
Yeah.
And their repairs didn't last, so we know that we need to do more
A more structured.
structured
I
concrete
get that.
repair work. So if you look, for example, and I encourage you to take a walk over to the bus loop and walk in front of the cafeteria, you can see that it's lifting, the concrete is lifting. Well, our people tried to repair that.
Yeah.
We've also had some issues there with water making
Sure.
the pad rise,
Yeah.
and then it's had to be sawed down. So we have a lot of concrete work that we have tried to address, some of it, but we're thinking it makes the most sense for the district to do it all together in, phased repair.
So before we get to that meeting on Tuesday night, can I get a copy of I'd like to read the contract to see what it is. you know, what's included. I got what you told me, I just would like to
We
see
can
it.
make sure you get that.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just say, I think it is a combination of factors. I think if we had had a director on board of operations, which we are posting, we're looking to fill that position, but if we'd had that person in place right now, we may be still going this same route just based on the magnitude and some of the design, and also some of it has to do with timing with some of our facilities and just where they are over the years and what happens with concrete with the winters and you know, some of those pieces. So it is a combination, but yes, I agree with you.
I'm sorry, I had one other question on that list.
Sure.
The up above stuff with the cars, the vehicles we're getting rid of. In the budget, is there a replacement for these? Direct one-for-one replacement for these?
You can go ahead.
Well, it was taken out of last year's. How do you want to explain that? You know what I mean? You know more
So-
about it than I do.
We had.
You're
Okay,
up.
turn back on.
So we actually made the purchase last year with dollars that we had available from last year's budget. So that purchase was in the works, and
They're all one-for-one, so we ended up with 4 new vehicles and a new trailer?
Correct.
Okay. And that was part of the disposition of our, whatever, surplus or whatever we're calling it?
we had some funds left over in the general fund that we didn't utilize, largely in the area of utilities. So we were able to make this purchase last year using those dollars.
So I'm sorry, so I'm gonna have to go back and
So
check my
yes,
stuff.
it is from the
surface.
surface, so the surplus.
But we, the board, voted specifically to purchase those vehicles with those funds.
You did not. So what will happen is, at the end of the fiscal year, you will see a number of transfers.
Right.
When you vote on those transfers, that's part of the year-end process. So no, we did not specifically bring that to you to vote on it. If you would like us to, we can.
Going forward, I think things as big as vehicles absolutely should be brought to the board's attention if we're going to be buying vehicles.
So do you want
That's
them
large
to,
capital expenditures.
do you want that to come to the board every time a vehicle is purchased, or only when it's being purchased with surplus? There are vehicles on the capital plan, and you approve the capital plan, and we talk about that. So we just want to be clear, going forward, how you would like things like this presented.
Let me just
Me,
jump
Patty
in too.
Booker,
Can I ask?
personally would just, if they're included in a capital plan and we voted on a capital plan that said we're buying 6 buses and 3 cars, then I don't need to see it again. But if it's something that was new, that, because we had a surplus or whatever, and we're gonna get this in because it makes sense to do it, those are the ones that me, Patty Booker, I don't know how the rest of you all feel, but that's how I feel about it.
With these part of our plan these were part of what was the end of life to these vehicles was anticipated. It was anticipated that these were part of our projection that they would continue within the district, that they were necessary vehicles, right? These weren't new additionals, these were things that we were anticipating, that there is an end of life to equipment. So these were anticipated, that when the end of life came to these were trucks that a specific mechanic is using that we would need to replace. Yeah, we actually walked into some of that last year with some of the vehicles that were rusted really bad, and when I had the mechanics look at them and look at the other trucks, it was to the point where these were going to soon be unsafe for our people to drive.
But are they, so like we look at our 5-year capital plan, I would expect, in addition to our bus replacement plan, which we do have a bus replacement plan, that we would have a vehicle replacement plan.
And we do.
that it would show somewhere out, maybe in another year or so, we would have seen these 4 or 5 vehicles were on a plan somewhere. We just happened to pull them in because of the timing being what it was.
And that's correct. So we
Okay.
do have a vehicle
And so
replacement
that's
on
good,
capital.
and that's fine. I just think we should still go, hey, we're pulling these forward and we're going to use the money specifically for that.
And we'll definitely do that
It
going
would be
forward.
helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions on those two? And then, I'm sorry, what changed?
Don't forget this change.
Yeah. So on the Jeff Freeman, the acceptance of grants and/or donations, there was a tree years ago, before Michelle and I were here, that was placed outside the middle school gyms to go out into the fields. We did not know, but at one point the tree was moved over to the fence. The gentleman, Mr. Freeman, who donated on behalf of his son Jeffrey, came to me and asked, where's the tree? We had to do a little bit of research. We figured out where the tree got placed. It's not doing well, so he has asked if he could donate a bench now next to the basketball court underneath one of our trees. So that is the donation that is being requested by Mr. Freeman to replace the tree that was ended up being moved and is not doing well. He'd like to put a bench underneath the tree down on would be the east side of the basketball court underneath one of our trees near the parking lot.
It's a lovely sentiment.
So on the agenda, you'll see it says donated for Jeff Freeman. That will be changed on next week's agenda to say donated on behalf of.
Yeah.
Is there a reason, Michelle, why there's no cost or value assigned to it?
I do not have any value.
He did not move forward in any of the process with this. He just came to me and I said I would bring it to the facilities to see if we have a head nod that he could move forward and decide exactly what he wanted to get before he started that process.
It's lovely.
So new on the agenda this year, you'll see something you probably haven't seen before, and it's the approval of the 1819 bus routes district-wide. We have 261 bus routes. As you recall, we recently went through a state audit, and one of the things that they looked at was transportation and bus safety. And so we were told that we should be approving our bus routes on an annual basis. You have the bus routes attached. You can see that it just shows where the stops are. It does not include information. It does not include where the stops are. It just includes information about where the bus is going and the duration of time that the bus spends. So that will meet what the state auditors are requesting. They would prefer if you list all of your bus routes and all of the stops. We decided that we did not want to publish all of that information. We didn't want people to know specifically.
The state wants people to do that?
They do.
Seems like the Kidnapper's Guide for Dummies.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we had spoke about, is we didn't want to have all of that information there. I think the reason they want you to do that is because a lot of districts have contracted transportation.
Yeah.
And so it's a way for them to check to make sure that this is really where your bus is stopped, because you are required to report that every year to PDE, so you get your transportation subsidy.
Michelle, from a policy perspective, does that need to go into our transportation policy? Because I'm not sure that that's in there. I'm not sure. I mean, I just pulled it up and I didn't look at the AR yet, but,
The approval is not in there. The mention
Right.
of a need to approve?
yes.
It's certainly something I can work with Tony on to make sure that it gets into the AR. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be in the policy. But there are many things that we approve on an annual basis that are not necessarily in an AR.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like busy work to put it into a policy like that. I mean, just approve it.
Well, generally, what's in our policies is anything that's mandated by law. And if this is something that's mandated by law, usually it's in the policy. Is it law, I mean.
I'm not sure that it's in the public school code. I can double check that for sure. It was
But-
recommended by the state auditors when they were
But
here.
maybe
though.
put it in the AR just to have some historical reference to it, so that when we're all not here anymore, somebody has.
I'll work with Tony
Right,
Rabarczyk on that.
Okay, thanks.
So is anybody going to vote against the bus routes?
Could I ask a question though? Because for me, this is great, this is fine, this is helpful. It's gonna open a discussion, so maybe we can head the discussion off with some executive level summary of some metrics. How many buses, which school, how many buses before and after, what the average ride, the number of kids that are riding the buses. It it's great, it's cool, looking at the list is great, but it really needs an executive summary on the front that says, kind of summary. And that actually could be something that we're looking at as a metric, really, for the transportation team, right? How long are, what's the average duration of time that the kids are on a bus?
And we can provide that information. I know that transportation does have all of that information.
Right?
They do.
But if you did that and we did it on an annual basis, just like we're doing this, that end could lend itself, Mike, to discussions. Hey, we need another bus, or, maybe we need some smaller buses
John
instead
presented
of
all
big
that to us.
buses.
He did.
He did recently.
I believe it was when he came and gave us an update on the propane bus pilot.
But unless we have a thing like the propane, they don't always come before us.
Sure. So we can put that together. That'll be relatively easy to do.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Moving on.
Moving on is the Radnor Trail update. I just wanted to let the committee know that I went to the Township meeting a few weeks ago. President Solomon was also there in attendance. From that meeting of the Township, I have reached out to Township officials, and I will be meeting them on Thursday to get a little more information on the Radnor Trail and other trails that will be on our properties throughout the Township. And I just wanted to put it out there if there was anything specifically this committee would like me to ask of that meeting on Thursday.
What do you
I
have
would
on
do
the
it.
list of
Okay.
stuff? And also, what other, are they gonna ask us about using our property again, or, cause I mean,
Yeah.
I say this all the time, they just look at us as, the people that work in that building think that we're just this giant land bank that they can use for whatever, whenever,
Totally.
you know? Are they gonna ask us about the stuff like Martha's Brown's Woods and?
I think it's more, are they gonna ask us? They need
That's
to
what I mean.
ask us. They need to ask us. It's our property, it's our liability. They need to ask us for permission with detailed plans
Or do they wanna
about what
buy
they wanna
Martha's
do.
Brown's Woods? Unless we put a maintenance facility on it, I don't know if we can build anything on it. The parking lot would be great for the high school kids, but then we'd have to build a bridge.
Agreed. We need, anytime we're talking about our land, the district and this board needs to, have final approval and final say. And even, that meeting was a meeting, my understanding was looking at this entire larger plan and all the people that are involved, and it's well beyond just us as a school district or a township, it's a larger piece.
Yeah, we were just one piece of that.
Yes. Any updates at this point with the piece of the trail that we've been focusing on for the high school, that piece?
I've reached out to Peter Simone from Simone Collins, and him and I have been back and forth, so I have requested from him kind of a timeline of where they are. So as soon as I get that, I will pass that information on.
And Todd, didn't they bring up another trail that they're building as part of this network that maybe was on a different property we hadn't talked about before? It came as sort of a little surprise.
It appeared that way to me. That was
Yeah.
one of the reasons I wanted to reach out as well, because me not knowing
Refresh
the
my
entire
memory,
trail
it was a
system,
while
I
since-
don't know which piece of land it was, but looking there, I actually leaned over to President Solomon and said, am I reading this correctly, that this is our property based on the color code? And she agreed with me, and that was one of the reasons as well we reached out, because it appears that there's going to be a new trail on one of the pieces of our property, and I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which it is without having that sheet in front of me.
Yeah, so maybe we should rephrase that they might think they're putting a trail on our property. I mean, honestly, it just,
lot of people think a lot of things.
I totally agree with Mike. It's just out of control.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the committee know
One thing
that I'm meeting
would
with
be
them on
helpful
Thursday.
if you're going to have a conversation with them, talk about connecting trails. There is a bridge, to Mike's point, from Radnor Elementary School over to that parking lot and the trail, and et cetera, that's over there, the turf field that's now there. That bridge has not been maintained, not been maintenanced. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm not suggesting there's any structural problems, but it is in desperate need of some cleaning and painting.
Yeah, and they're supposed to come
And
back to
some
us.
trees need to be cut back, like it's obscured now with
Well, they're
the
supposed to come back to
overgrowth.
us, like, what, 2 years ago about that?
I'm just saying, I haven't heard anything about what they're doing with it. I think it had been in a budget, out of a budget, in a budget. I don't know where it is. But I do know that the tri-party agreement makes some indication that we are also required to participate in the financial aspect of preparing or caring for that bridge. Has anybody approached us to ask us, How much are
Yeah,
we
but-
willing to put, like, it needs some discussion. It's been, let me see, we built it in 2000. It's 18 years old. It needs a discussion about what's going on with it. It needs maintenance.
And I'm not clear about this, and maybe for Andrew's benefit being new, it sounds like there's a laundry list of things that are land issues in terms of the school district. You know, we've been familiar with the trail one, the main trail one, but all these other things, is there some way that for people like us who are new to the committee, we can understand what those crossover issues are? Like just see a list or something? This new middle property you saw at the meeting the other day, so we come back and we can sort of keep our heads around what these crossover issues we're tracking with the township are?
I mean, that encompasses all four of the, you know, unknown knowns, the knowable knowns, the knowable unknowns, and the unknown knowns. I mean, that's because we're coterminous, you know, and we use their properties, they use ours. I mean, that really could cover everything. It's like, you know, and part of the problem is the township doesn't even know what they own. Like, half the time they talk to you and they're like, oh, we'll give you this in exchange for that. Well, we own that.
The tennis
Oh,
courts
what?
especially.
You know, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
parking spots. Well, we own those, you know. Why are you offering
Well,
up?
we
is
do,
So
the
there's,
have
I
you
mean,
seen
there's
the
literally,
COIL
it's,
report?
I mean, it's,
Have you guys?
From the CRC that they presented the other day?
That was just a small piece. COIL did
But-
the full analysis for us that gives you at least, in my recollection is it was 2.5 inches thick, binder of all of our properties and any kind of terms or agreements around those properties. So it would list, at least if we have an agreement with the township for them to rent the land for $1 a year, you at least got that as a baseline. If you haven't seen that, I'm sure we can get you guys a copy of that. It's educational, anyway.
yeah, but I'm not trying to poo-poo your thing, but it's like literally everything that happens in this town is like one of the, you know, it's all commingled, you know,
Okay, so
from the
is the-
flooding out
I
front to
think
the
it's
flooding in North
But
Plain to.
what I'm saying is that if there are multiple issues in there, this is the crossover that you say there is, which I hear that loud and clear. From an operational standpoint, doesn't it make sense to sort of build a, you know, sort of an operational protocol that we insist upon that applies to anything that, since there are so many things, I mean, is that the strategy for building some kind of boundaries, for lack of a better word, no pun intended, with the township for how they approach projects on our land?
But the agreements that we have with them, the individualized agreements,
Are they
have
different?
terms in there
And are they
about
different?
their
Yeah,
need to
They're different based on
work through us, yeah.
what it is, you know, what the particular piece of property or whatever is.
I think there was, but I'd have to go back and check. When we put together for the new board members, the orientation, I think we included in there some pieces about the properties we own and what are some of the terms. I can't remember, though. So certainly, I think we could go back and put something together for board members. It might be a good refresher for everyone. The reality is, for the question you're asking, for some of the things, you know, until we were in attendance, and again, I don't know, maybe there was meetings 5 years ago about the trails where this master trail thing, that's well beyond us as a school district.
That's
I'm
years
sure it's
old.
been going on for a long time.
It is.
But the important piece for us is we need to make sure we're staying on top of it, and make sure that we are monitoring it closely, and and that's why, you know, Todd is looking even for the specific piece, you know, with the high school. You know, we took a lot of time to all walk it together. We took a lot of time to have a lot of discussions in the spring about that, that trail and that piece. There's still a lot to go on there, and that we want to know what are the next steps, and we want to know what's the timeline. So we're pushing to find out. We want to hear and be, you know, to make sure that we are being kept abreast of the next steps, and they're, you know, keeping us in the loop with everything. So, but certainly, we could create a summary for the board members that just lists, you know, I know we have it because I've seen it, you know, all the lands we have. That's why I'm thinking it was in the orientation, the packet, the lands we have, and then what are some of those implications for those pieces. We could do that.
Thank you.
And the other piece to that too, Ken, is the funding.
Yes.
Where are they on the funding? Just because one person in administration says we're going to do something doesn't mean that the body of Board of Commissioners has voted for it.
Oh.
So
Right.
I want to be cautious, like that
Yes.
should be a part of the discussion. You want to put X trail on our property, this is the implications, these are the things, this is whatever, And where's your funding?
Well, right. I think there's always, I think, you know, I think the challenge that school boards have and commissioners have is that, you know, and administrators have it, is that, you know, you get in trouble when you think out loud. And just because a sole commissioner or a sole board member express an interest in wanting to do something doesn't mean that the district is doing it, or doesn't mean that the administration is doing it. I mean, you know, it takes a board to decide, you know, on what we're going to do on that. So I think that's also what leads to this too, because there's a lot of people who just think out loud about, wouldn't this be nice, wouldn't that be nice? And people assume, oh, that's what's happening. It's not necessarily what's happening.
So we could minimize our churn?
Mm-hmm.
If they have a list and they say, here are the things that are funded, the board's agreed to it, well, clearly that's where we need to focus our discussion, right?
Yeah.
Not get all tied up on something
Right.
that is
So let's
somebody's pipe
take
dream.
the first step to we'll
Yeah.
we'll
You should
reissue
look at that
or
COIL
look
report.
to
It's
see what we
really
have,
interesting.
just to get our board on, you know, all on the same page with what are the different lands we have, and make sure that some of the agreements and details are shared with everyone.
That would be great. And
Yeah.
I've asked this question before, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but does it make sense? Is it feasible? Is it permissible that, say, board leadership of each government entity would meet once a quarter and give a heads up, hey, we're going to be talking about this in the coming months? So at least, I mean, us chasing them and monitoring them seems like a lot of work. I don't know, maybe it's not. But if there's a way that they sit down as a matter of course 3-4 times a year to say, here's what we're looking at that impacts you, and school district could say, and here's what we're looking at that impacts you. It takes some of the wear and tear off of Todd or whomever having to chase them. They put some of the burden on them to come to us.
I don't know, I mean, I would just speak to the recent events. I don't feel like we're necessarily chasing as much as we just want to stay on top of it. You know, we've been engaged in this, and we want to make sure we're staying on top of it. I think in the last year and a half, there's been pretty good communication. I mean, I think this board handled very well discussion about one of our fields in the spring, and what the township wanted to do, and we discussed it at a board meeting, and then, you know, we reached out to the township and said that, you know, we're in support of you looking to survey the land. However, we want to be involved in discussion on what is actually you want to do on that field to create a bathroom or a comfort station or whatever that looks like. And again, Parks and Rec were involved. So I think the discussions are happening and people are talking to one another. I think the problem becomes it's the churn, I think, as Patty so well stated, there's a churn of discussions by different people, different groups, that everyone assumes this is happening or that's happening, and maybe that isn't what's happening.
Speaking of the happening, what is going on with the traffic around the high school? Not related to any one particular property, the overall traffic around the high school, and any furthering discussions about that entire section, Radnor Chester Road, King of Prussia Road. There was going to be some bigger discussions around traffic mitigation with the change of, you know, with the construction and all the stuff that's going on. Has there been any further discussion on that, and have we been invited to participate?
I have not heard anything.
Could we explicitly reach out and ask the question, what is the game plan and the discussion?
Yeah, I think the question now with that is, you know, timetable and when are things happening. I think we have had discussion presentation about some of the traffic there with the development and what we were hoping to see with turning lanes and lights and those pieces.
Yeah, I'm talking beyond that.
Beyond that, okay.
Yeah, because that was specific to one site.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to completely
Oh, okay, that's what I'm trying to
ignore one site.
Okay,
But
The extension of the discussion was to be around what else was going to happen for that entire area with traffic. Not necessarily by the site owner of the one site. These were
Okay.
other improvements that they were going to be making, and there were discussions on the table.
Who's they?
The township,
township, okay.
related to handling the traffic. We've got I'm trying very hard not to bring up
Gotcha, so you're
any
not,
one particular
you're not
site
talking about
because
that.
it gets us down a rat hole. I'm talking about the bigger picture. And has there been any furthering discussion on that? And if not, I think we need to ask the questions. What is the plan?
so what is the, want to make sure I understand the question and make sure the board is, so what is the plan? You would like us to reach out to the township to understand what is the plan for traffic beyond just what is taking place with construction in King of Prussia Road next to our high school? What is the plan for traffic beyond just that
Yes.
area, knowing that there is a large change? I mean, obviously, the reason for the question is because there's a large change happening in that area, King of Prussia Road.
There's an expectation
So-
of 500 incremental vehicles
Right.
at both peak morning and night, based on the current plan
Right.
presented by the current owner. That has implications beyond just the turning lanes immediately in
Right,
front of
so-
their facility. What is the discussion around that?
Right, so we have been brought to the table with that discussion on what is next to our property.
Yes.
You're asking a question beyond our property, what is happening in the areas beyond our property and before our property is the question you're
Well,
asking.
and on Radnor Chester Road, which is on our property.
So on the
so-
other end of our property.
All the way around our property, right? So I know there's been discussions about traffic lights being put on signal systems, even as far as over to Radnor Elementary's entry was on a traffic loop. There's been discussions about that. Is that happening? What is
Part of
the
the agreement
plan?
for this property.
Yeah, there was pieces that we were made, yeah,
So-
that there was
so-
pieces of agreement that did stretch beyond for traffic lights and
Okay,
things like that in turn.
so, all right, so maybe that's why that one's sticking in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
There's been discussions about what can or should be done around the bridge and the number of times the trucks hitting the bridges, because that impacts us, it impacts our buses, it impacts our kids and our staff from getting to the school. There's been discussions about widening the road at the mouth of King of Prussia Road and Lancaster Avenue to create yet another turning lane or whatever. These are all things that potentially impact us. On Radnor, did I say Radnor Chester? I meant King of Prussia. Widening King of Prussia Road. There's been other discussions, lots and lots of discussions, so trying to eliminate the churn. Could we find out what exactly are they, when next will they be having a dialogue about how we're going to manage that incremental number of cars that are coming our way and what the impact will be for us as a school district?
Certainly, we could reach out to the township and ask about those pieces.
And just, we'd
Yes.
like a seat at the table when you're having those discussions, or a heads up at least, that you're going to have those discussions. That's all I'm asking.
Sure, and there were things that I would not be able to quote off the top of my head, but that Mike was just mentioning. I mean, I know there were things that did stretch beyond that stretch of road at King of Prussia Road when it came to turn signals and lights, and there was things, but I couldn't.
Coordinating all the lights.
Coordinating and things like that went beyond, but we could certainly reach out and just say, ask what is the status of those pieces, and that we as a school district are interested to be part of those discussions as those continue.
Right,
We can do that.
especially because our
Sure.
transportation hub is right there.
I would do
And
that.
will absolutely be impacted.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bleachers, sticking with the property.
So last fall, we talked about doing a design build with bleacher companies for the replacement of the bleachers up on Prevost Field up at the high school. We met with 2 different bleacher companies. We talked with the bleacher companies, and through these discussions, we found that there were other factors that made design build not probably the most viable option for the district. And part of that was the site. And what these bleacher companies told us is they'll do design build, that's where they stop. They put the bleachers in, they replace the bleachers, but they don't address any issues on your site. So one of the conversations that we've had, meaning administration, is that really what good does it do us to have handicap accessible bleachers if people who are handicapped can't access them? So we think that it makes a lot more sense to take a look, to use this as an opportunity to take a look at our site, not only just the bleachers, but how people access those bleachers and access Prevost Field where the bulk of our games are played, and make some changes to that. Originally, we thought we could just put some cutouts in, and that was something that we were thinking about doing. But then when we started to talk with companies about putting in cutouts, they said you can't really just put in a curb cutout because that implies that a handicapped person entering has a place to exit. And so it just became very apparent to us that there were more issues on this site and that we needed some additional help to address those. One of the other things we found, and I'll let Todd talk a little bit about this, is that the retaining wall that we have up at the high school behind the bleachers.
The current bleachers are put into the ground, and then behind that is a retaining wall for that basketball court up top.
And the pool.
And the pool, yeah, that retaining wall has moved. So we have some other structural issues there that we have to address, and if we would just put the bleachers in and not address that retaining wall, we're afraid that over time, that retaining wall is going to keep moving,
They
and
take the bleachers out that we just put in and
Correct.
fix the wall behind it.
Right. So, one of the good things that came out from meeting with the bleacher companies is we were able to get a pretty good price to replace the bleachers on Prevost. We feel that we have accurate numbers so we can incorporate those into the capital plan next year, as well as the possibility of installing some seating on Anki if that's something we want to move forward with. So when all of these issues came about, we decided that we would interview 3 architect firms, Blackney Hayes, Gilbert Architects, and Schrader Group. And Schrader Group, you may not have heard of. Schrader Group, if you remember Danny Hoffer, she used to work with Gilbert and did quite a bit of work on the high school previously when we were looking at capacity. She has now moved to Schaefer Group, and so we thought that it made sense because she's had history up at the high school to bring them back. So it was Mr. Bechtold, Mr. Friel, Mr. Stitzel, and myself. We interviewed these 3 companies. We talked with them. And we'd like to make a recommendation that we move forward with engaging Schrader Group to help us take a look at the bleachers and replace them, as well as looking at our site.
Yeah. This design build firm's kind of like when you put a shed, they'll put the shed on the foundation, but you have somebody else do the site work.
Yeah, basically. They'll do the demolition, but in terms of addressing access, and we've got, if you're familiar with Prevost Field, you know that there's a steep incline going down, and you've probably seen the band students pushing heavy musical equipment down that hill, which really is not a very safe situation for them. And I have a new appreciation for how difficult it is to maneuver that site since my foot injury, and I can honestly tell you, it definitely needs some addressing. You know, the sidewalks are uneven, the trees are making the sidewalks heave, so it is, as I said, an opportunity for us to take a look at our site and improve the access for everyone.
I've asked Michelle and Todd to look at putting together some potential timelines with all this as well. We need to look at what are our potential timelines with all this. We need to also look at what will be the timeline for this board to discuss. Different options with this. When we had talked about this, not this past spring, but the spring before, so a year ago when we had talked about this, there were board members who expressed an interest to, well, you know, we want to understand a little bit more about the potential for where bathrooms could be or not be, or challenges with concession stands. There is a lot of handicapped accessibility that goes along with our facilities when it comes to bathrooms and comes to even, you know, concession stands. So there's a lot of pieces to this. So that I've asked them that we need to have a timeline and something that is shared here with the board to look at what is the potentially, what are we looking at in gathering this information, what are the different aspects, what different types of options could we be looking at as a board, and what will be that process for us to discuss that so we can move forward, and what is the process for Mr. Bechtold and for the team here and the district of the high school to work together to share with our groups that are using those fields what it is we are looking at. So that would be all part of the development of this timeline, and I believe you've reached out to the firms and they would be able to help put that together.
I reached out to Schrader Group. I did get some information back from them. Todd and I have not had a chance to actually review it and meet with Ken to go over it. We want to take a look at that before we bring it forward to make sure that we feel that it's realistic and that it's doable. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want to present a timeline and then find out 4 or 5 months down the road that that was not realistic. So we need to have some additional conversations before we bring that forward.
And I want the board to be part of those discussions, and what is it the board would like to see developed in this, and what questions does the board have as well as we move forward?
Yeah, that would definitely be my concern, right? The last time we sent the RFP out, it was kind of broad and not very specific, and it didn't yield really any usable information. So we need to be pretty specific about what we're looking for. And obviously, it needs to be set up so that we can pick and choose which elements we intend to move forward with, because funding is not, endless. And so we may need to make some choices of what's necessary and what's nice to have. So I just, if we end up doing this, I'm hearing you loud and clear that we need more than just replacing the bleachers, a one-for-one replacement. But we need to be really specific. A, not to waste time, B, not to waste money, and C, not to lay out there options that, quite frankly, we cannot fund. So,
We need to discuss that.
yes.
So this is what I would propose, and you can tell me if you are all in agreement to this. Since we've had this discussion and you're in favor of, hiring an architect to help us with this process, why don't we push this agenda item to September? That'll give Ken, myself, and Todd an opportunity to meet with Schrader Group to go over that timeline and make sure that we feel it's realistic, and then we can come back to the committee in September and have some further discussion.
How much is Schrader charging us?
I do not have that information in front of me.
So would they be charging you for this kind of preliminary proposal?
They would not.
There is no fee for this upfront part?
There's no fee for this upfront.
Then we come
run.
back, they put together a package, we look at a timeline, and then there's going to be some need to provide funding for architectural design, or et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. And then what we can do is we can lay out some specific criteria.
Are we required to get multiple bids for that service?
For the architect service?
Yes.
No, we are not. It's a contracted service, so you can hire basically whoever you want. We did ask for proposals from these 3 different groups if they were going to provide us with some services, and we talked about bleachers on Prevost, bleachers on Anki, and then the possibility of looking at some other improvements. And they all did give us a proposal. Schrader Group was the least expensive of the proposal, but what we can do, and it was the one that we felt the most comfortable with, we can now go back to them and say, okay, this is what we want. We want this more specific, and we can narrow down that scope.
What kind of ballpark are we talking?
I don't have it with me. If you like, I can run upstairs and find it.
You don't need to run upstairs. Don't
Would-
want to
would
risk
we-
any injury.
No, don't even do. Would we anticipate looking to, when do we anticipate making the decision on moving forward with the architectural firm?
I would hope that we could make that decision in September.
Yes, we need to get this moving, so we can install them in, 19?
That's where I don't want, that's what
And,
I don't want conjecture or guessing until, I want to have us all talk and make sure we're on the
Sticking
same
a shovel in the
page.
ground, December 31, 2019.
Yeah,
So it's the end of the summer, start of football season. I've not been over to the field because my last one graduated, yeah. But how does one thing we committed to was cleaning up those bleachers because last year's condition was not acceptable. So what is the status of the bleachers?
They were scraped down and painted. I'm biased, but I think they look okay. I know you've been there.
I see our
I think you've
principal
been
in the
there.
back of the room. We're happy with the,
Mr. Bechtold,
Definitely an improvement from last year. The maintenance guys were.
anything's an improvement from last year. Are they much improved, like when you sit on them, they don't creak, they don't, I mean, things aren't flaking off,
yeah, and again, the seats were never a problem with flaking off, the actual seats themselves. It was
base.
it's the base is where, so the bases have all been scraped and painted. The inspections, again, are even with this, finding out, things that concern a superintendent. You come to my office and you tell me a retaining wall's moving, I get very concerned.
yeah, sure.
The reality is that the inspectors have looked at it, and it is something that we need to know about as we are looking to do any construction. We are, we've had everything inspected and everything is safe, and the inspection and safety of the bleachers is beyond the next couple, I think it's another 3
they
to
mentioned
5.
3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years. Not that we're looking to push things off for 3 to 5 years, but that's the feeling from the inspectors on where they are, which is good to hear. Yes, I think it is significantly improved, and it'll be in good shape for this fall season, and even, beyond if need be.
And the recommendations from the inspector regarding the bleachers themselves, putting on brackets, those type of things, I handed that to maintenance, and they told me everything was taken care of based on that
Okay.
report.
All right. New business?
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Around timing. So I know last time we talked a bit about the elementary school enrollment discussion. We listed a bunch of questions. I know there was some work to go back and look at things. I'm just looking for timing, rough timing. I mean, is this a September, October, November discussion, or is this November, December, January discussion? What is it?
I think it's more closely to the November, December, January, but we will talk about that as we talk about district goals next week, because it is something that is a priority to look at this year.
Okay.
So now it's a matter of fitting it in the most timely place, that we make sure that what do we have to do with that information. The reality is it's something we monitor very closely each year as we're building, the schedules and staffing our buildings. But the more extensive study that we charged that the board charged, the administration charged us to look at after the spring, I'm thinking it's going to be probably more somewhere around the November, December, January, but we can talk about that next week.
Okay, thank you.
Got anything? No? Anything?
Just as a matter of FYI, we didn't approve the minutes, but
Oh, I
skipped
thought I
over
missed
piece.
that. I thought I
Skipped
missed
over that
it.
piece before we go to public comment, didn't know.
Approve
if
the
you-
minutes? Nice, look good, everybody?
Fine.
Happy?
They're all good.
Happy with the finance minutes too, or?
Yeah, they look good as well, yeah. Yep. Any other minutes, just send them my way.
Any
I'll-
other minutes?
Yep.
Policies next. Public comment?
Roberta Winters, I heard a lot of money figures flying around, and I know you know the rules better than I do, but I just want to make sure that we're going out to bid when we need to go out to bid. Thanks.
I heard Ms. Goldman's comment about can the boards possibly, or the leadership of the boards, meet to sort of get some of the issues that are ahead and have a discussion about them. I would encourage the board to think about doing that, and maybe not just the leadership, but have a meeting that's open to the public, because there are so many issues, I think, particularly at this time, that are overlapping issues, like the tri-party agreement, which was mentioned in connection with the bridge tonight, and it's been mentioned with other issues. The trail, which was mentioned tonight, that certainly overlaps. Artificial turf, I think the township has a lot of commitment with using our fields, and they're costly. Traffic situation and stormwater. So all of these things, as I said earlier, I was surprised that no one from the school district was attending the meeting last night about stormwater and the effects, if we indeed had stormwater issues related to this storm. I didn't hear that discussed tonight, which sort of surprises me, because I thought perhaps that would be something on the agenda. And then the different orphan properties that we own. Someone mentioned, I think it was Mr. Miller, Martha Brown's Woods, that we really don't have any intended use, and possibly the best protection of that area would be to have the township be the owner of the property, because that's really what the township should be doing. It should be looking at parks. That's not the school district's job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister? Nope.
Hello. You just turned it off.
Hi, my name is Chris Henkel. Thank you for letting me speak. I am a junior at Radnor High School, and my sister Lucy is also, she's going to be a freshman. Our brother Peter passed away in January, and he would have been a freshman this year too. He drove a wheelchair, and he had a hard time accessing the fields and bleachers at the high school. as a lot of people do. He really needed these kind of improvements to safely access and enjoy events at the RHS fields. And even though he won't be here to see it happen, we're really happy that you've made a step to design improvements to the to the fields, and we're here to offer our support and help in any way you can use it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to second that. I'm Tim Henkel, Peter, Lucy, Chris, and Ian's father. Our son Ian graduated 2 years ago. So Peter's been a spectator at that field since about 2012, 2013. So we've, I think the thing I want to focus you on is that while there may be reasons to push things off a month or two, this is long delayed in our eyes. And to any of those who have tried to attend games and practices and events at those fields. If I were an owner of Enki Field myself, setting aside Prevost for a second, if I were an owner of Enki Field, I would close those bleachers. They're a danger. Someone's going to get hurt badly, more badly than those we've seen. Children, elderly people are, really in jeopardy on those fields, on those blocks that are called bleachers. As for Prevost Field, creaking and chip paint are nuisances, and it's good that they get some attention. But there are no seating availability for people in wheelchairs, and there is no necessarily accessibility. And there's I would applaud you for going outside of the bleachers themselves, because really it is a site-based issue. The trails that wrap around under the scoreboard, the trail that gets you around to the visitor side fields, which does technically have an accessible spot, has a ramp. But that obviously is a visitor's seating area and does not quite great for the wheelchair-bound home fan. So thanks. I think what we want you to hear from us is that we're supporting this, and also we're going to try and be a little bit of a push behind it, because it's a condition that I think leaves people vulnerable, which leaves the school district vulnerable. And I think there might, I don't know if you've done this, and I don't know if anybody's addressed this or thought about this, but one of the realities is there is an exposure. I mean, there is absolutely an exposure, which is not to talk about lawsuits or things like that. There's an exposure to accidents, and there's an exposure to an accessibility claim that you should recognize and add that to your degree of urgency.
I'm interested in your thoughts on the other sites, the middle school.
Yeah. Well, the middle school obviously is a much newer facility.
Clearly, but I mean,
Peter's time there, so this is a place where he actually attended, didn't get to attend the high school or even get to the open house. But his attendance at the middle school was pretty well facilitated. It's an accessible place. He had his own elevator key, go up and down. Grounds are pretty good. There's a trail around a field that gets pretty moist sometimes, but that's not the biggest problem in the world. We, well equipped with ramps where there need to be ramps, curb cuts where there need to be curb cuts. The high school is very clearly a much, much older facility, and what's been done has been very sort of, I think, done more to facilitate loading and unloading, little cart access and things like that, than it has been to actually address the accessibility for people.
And what elementary school?
He went to, so he's at the cream of the crop. So he went to Radnor Elementary.
Oh, all right.
Also a very new
And same
facility.
thing there, your feedback on that would be that it was pretty accessible?
Yeah. When
Okay.
he was there, he was a lot more agile in his wheelchair.
Okay.
So he could handle some of the slopes with a little more.
Yeah, because there are a couple of
Yeah.
steeper slopes.
Yeah,
Okay.
but paved walks on those slopes, most of them,
Uh-huh.
even wrapping around the front of
Yeah,
the school.
okay. That's helpful feedback, too.
Yeah. The high school, again, much different
That's a
situation.
long time since it's
especially
been
for
dealt with.
events. So to get a wheelchair-bound person into the high school for a play or for class includes a nice farm of parking stalls. You get on the other side of the school, and everything is, there are two. Grandma gets them first, and everybody else is up the hill, and that hill is a significant slope. So,
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and hope you follow along and come back.
you
And
can
give
expect
us
to
some-
see us pretty frequently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and listen, that's an offer to help. I'm
I'm interested in your
I'm a
thoughts.
real estate developer by trade. I run architectural and engineering design teams frequently. I'm looking out for our best interests as an owner of our properties. That's my business. I think there is the opportunity to create a good plan that can be implemented in pieces. Those pieces can be scheduled by priority. Those priorities can be scheduled by budgetary needs. Doing something soon is probably going to be pretty important. And, you know, having a large-scale plan, I think this is an opportunity for a huge victory, you know, to take things from where they are now. To me, it looks like a lot of deferred maintenance or attention. If Peter were going to be attending school this fall, I would be much less patient, which is, I'm not really proud of that fact on behalf of others who might benefit from it, but I would be more dramatically here, and there'd be more of Chris and Lucy and Pete's friends with us. So that's not a threat, but it is yeah, it's an important thing for us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. That's it for tonight.